Oh, yeah. It's a Sunday, baby. And you know what that means. That means me, Clark the Shark, I'm celebrating the Lord God today. And his name, of course, is Frank Zappa. Cruising with Ruben and the Jets, 1968. I gotta talk about this amazing album. When I bought this vinyl and took it home and played it, 1983, Torrance, California. Let's set the situation here, you guys. I was only 18 years old and I already knew a lot of Zappa albums, but people told me this one sucked and that I was going to hate it. And I was like, now, why would I hate Zappa? There's no possible way. And people were like, because Shark, that album sucks. It sounds like the 50s. It's really fucking lame. And I took it home and played it, I think I bought it at the Rhodium in Torrance. If that album, that vinyl, as I remember, was pretty scratchy. But whoever has my vinyl of Cruising with Ruben and the Jets around the South Bay somewhere, Torrance, Redondo Beach, Hermosa Beach, my vinyl collection, when I moved to San Diego, I just had an Isuzu pickup truck for cleaning swimming pools. I went down to San Diego in 1997 summer, and, I was moving all musical things out of my life. I still wrote songs here and there, but it was the middle of the 1990s, a horrible time for Clark the Shark. I don't know how I even survived that time. I was 32 years old and I let my Frank Zappa vinyls and all my other vinyls just go and twist in the proverbial wind, you guys. I didn't care anymore. I never got signed, me and my music. And Blake Douchebag hit it really big in 91. I always thought I'd get signed in 92 or 93. Then it didn't happen. 1993, I was 28 years old, 29 in 1994. That is an eternity old man in those days, you guys. And then 30 in 95, it was over. And I didn't give a shit about anything anymore. I was like, fuck it all. I'm just going to San Diego to clean swimming pools. I started working for a swimming pool company in Torrance called A to Z Pool in, I think, 1996, around March or April 96. I never really did anything before, you guys. I was a landscaper working for my brother Greg up in Bel Air. Ghazi Aita, that wealthy, rich Arab guy, owned Owlwood Estates, where Sonny and Cher, Tony Curtis, Marilyn Monroe, all used to live there, and other celebs, I think, you guys. Of course, the biggest celeb to ever live there was Clark the Shark, and I became like the Kato Kalin of Owlwood, living in the guest house. And I will swear, before Kato Kalin was known about, before O.J. Simpson murdered Nicole Brown Simpson, not far from where I lived in Beverly Hills, Bel Air, Holmby Hills, whatever. I lived right around the corner from that evil sodomite, Hugh Hefner, Sodom and Gomorrah guy who had the mansion. He better be fucking burning in hell right now, God. I'll believe in you, please. And I will once again call God, God. But until I know that for a fact, Zappa is God to me, Clark the Shark, right here on a Sunday, February 4 or 5, I don't know, 2024. But anyway, back to Beverly Hills, Century City. Everyone looks so pretty. Don't they know they're so damn lame because they don't even realize Sharky lives there too. Not far. But They called me Kato, you guys, before the OJ murders happened in 1994, not far from where I lived in Beverly Hills. My brother Greg and Rita, his wife, and others. There was a guy named Brad. There was a guy named Maurice, and they all called me Kato. It was so weird and ironic. And that's how I know this is all a simulation, you guys. It's actually a sharkulation. Because if it is a simulation, I control it. And I probably named myself Kato in 1992, 91, 1989, long before Kato Kalin existed, you guys, or, was known from the OJ murders. I'm serious, you guys. But anyway, when I was up in Beverly Hills listening to Zappa, it took me a long time to accept this record. But once I did, and I fully understood Cruisin' with Ruben and the Jets by Frank Zappa, this weird 1950s fucked up album. It's really not 1950s. It's just fucked up 60s, you guys. Alternative rock, indie rock, punk rock, way ahead of its time. As usual, as per par for the course with Frank. Everything he does is ahead of the 60s. It is, you guys. It's right planted firmly in the 70s, or maybe the 80s and 90s. In the 60s, you guys, I'm not kidding, right here on the Clark the Shark Show from the golden EIB Sharkerphone. It's not a microphone. It's a golden, solid gold Sharkerphone because it was christened and given to me by Mario Lopez from Entertainment Tonight and or TMZ. And he actually came down here to San Diego about 2 days ago. And he said, Sharky, since you are number one worldwide on WABC New York and elsewhere, every planet in the solar system, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Venus. I said Venus, not P, not that other word. Get your mind out of the gutter, you guys. Earth, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Pluto, Neptune. And of course, you guys, Uranus. Everywhere Clark the Shark is number one, at least in the Milky Way. I'm not sure about Andromeda. I think that's the closest galaxy to the Milky Way, but the Milky Way, you guys, is like 300,000 light years. Just our Milky Way. There's UFOs, aliens, and shit here that are so far away just in our own little tiny galaxy, the Milky Way, you guys. We'll never even see them. They can't even fly here. 200,000, 300,000 light years, you guys. I don't know how they're getting here, but they're using a wormhole or something. I don't know how they're doing it. And here's a little side note. Did you guys know that you're not supposed to be able to see it, but you can see Andromeda. It appears as a little speck. If you look real hard, you can even see it with the naked eye. I'm not kidding, but certainly with binoculars and or a telescope, you can see Andromeda. I think it's near Orion. I think I could be wrong there, you guys. But if it was or is, it was probably billions of years ago. And by now it's moved and we're not really seeing it. We're just seeing the remnants. You know how that is, you guys. What's that Eagles song? You can see the light or not the stars, or see the stars but not the light, but whatever. But Cruisin' with Ruben and the Jets, 1968, Frank Zappa and the Mothers of Invention. Now, when I did first hear this album in 1983 or 82, whatever it was, you guys, at South High, there was this kid named Jim Aviani who was into weird music, David Bowie, Frank Zappa, all this stuff. He was way ahead of the other kids, like a genius. And I remember I was a little intimidated by him. And I was worried, does this guy know more than me, Clark the Shark? And I remember I went and got into punk rock deeper just so that I had an edge on Jim Aviani. In case we had a conversation, I could be like, well, dude, which Black Flag albums do you know? Or which ones do you like? Or which album by the Germs? And I remember, I think we did have a conversation maybe at a South High football game at Torrance where, people didn't dare speak to Clark the Shark because, like, I knew everything. And, they would say, well, he lives in his own little world and stuff. But, they tried to cover it up with some shit because they knew, dude, you could have a fucking college degree and not know shit like Clark the Shark. I'm 5'6", baby, from the School of Hard Knocks. No college degrees, yet I know fucking shit no one knows. And Jim Aviani went silent, and so did some other kids around South and other people that knew well about music. And when they talked to me, Clark the Shark, they were walking on eggshells because they better know about everything. Frank Zappa, more than just The Who, Quadrophenia, and Jethro Tull and all that shit. Dude, you got to know more if you're talking a conversation with Clark the Shark. I'm talking when I was 17 in 1980 fucking 2, you guys. And if you can out-conversate Jim Aviani or people like that who are real punk rock, indie rock, or just weird rock intellectuals, then, dude, you really do run a simulation called the Sharkulation, where I know everyone does it, but it's not about masturbation. It's about Frank Zappa, Ruben, and the Jets, and Cruisin', baby. This album, 1968, which I, Clark the Shark, began to play obsessively up in Bel Air, Beverly Hills. I lived at, I think it was 600 Sunset, right across the street on Carrollwood Drive, where across the street from me, north of me, was where Michael Jackson died. And his ghost actually appears to me now in 2024 down here in San Diego. And he's like, Clark the Shark, you and me were forever connected. You lived at, Mr. Ida's on Sunset, and I died right across the street. And I'm like, Michael, I'm so sorry that happened. You are the king of pop, but me, Clark the Shark, I'm the king of rock, baby. The biggest musician on the internet. And I gotta tell you, dude, Michael Jackson might be good or whatever, super talented, but Clark the Shark is better because I know more about Frank Zappa than Michael Jackson will ever know, and a lot of people, and maybe even more than Jim Aviani, wherever he is. I'm sure Jim is watching my channel and he's like, yeah, fucking Clark the Shark was like exactly like this at Newton Middle School in 1977. Clark the Shark knew about the Talking Heads and television and, dude, you fucking name it. I knew it, dude. And Jim Aviani today, wherever he is, he'll be like, yeah, it's all true, you guys. He's not making this shit up. It's real. And I think I knew it all, though. It's not really a great thing or a badge of honor. It's just because, I didn't hang out with anybody, or maybe I couldn't because I was too smart or something, or grew up with too much abuse at 251 with, my brother Doug and Jeff and all that. And I was really a touchy-feely, feeling person where they used to, call me names, put me down. I was born with this disease, Bell's palsy, in 1965, probably from, where my dad was at Camp Lejeune. And half of my body was paralyzed, you guys. And by some miracle, all the way until 1978, I was doing therapy, going to doctors to try to correct Bell's palsy. And over time, I grew out of it and got stronger, and both sides of my body came to start to work, you guys. I'm not kidding. Half of my body, half of my face, my left ear, my right eye had surgeries. It was insane, dude. Don't ask me how I survived it. But by 1979, it was like Tommy, and I was cured, and then I became like listening to Shark You get the music. Come on, you guys. I mean, they used to bug me and make fun of me, call me half a man or half a person because of Bell's palsy. My brother Jeff, Doug, and others around the South Bay. Not so much my brother Bert. That guy was like a fucking retard. But just people in general, you guys. And that's how I, Clark the Shark, would gravitate and lean towards things like Frank Zappa and Cruisin' with Ruben and the Jets. Really weird albums. In the South Bay, Torrance, Redondo Beach, I was a really weird person who really was in his own little world. It really is true, you guys. And then, that's how I got in the Greenhouse Effect and all those killer fucking bands and musical projects around the South Bay, Torrance and Redondo, and playing, with killer fucking musicians. Steve Stepanian, who lived down at Nob Hill and Prospect in Redondo. And then, of course, Phil Keegan, who I grew up with. We would kind of go separate ways and then reunite off and on over the years. And right now, of course, we are estranged. In fact, me from my whole band right now, they're all like, why doesn't Sharky pay us money from that? And what you guys don't realize is I don't make a lot of money from this. And by the time I do, YouTube usually bans and deletes and demonetizes me. So by the time I get any money from Amazon Associates or YouTube or any of those, the money's all gone. It's fucking... I never get it, or they cut it off and I have to sue them for it or some shit. I admit I made some money with Blip TV, back in the day, but, that's all gone. It went up the nose of 3 houses in San Diego, property taxes and all that shit. And all I have left of me and for me today is Frank Zappa, Cruisin', baby, with Ruben and the Jets, 1968. Now this album, this 1950s sounding fucked up album, I don't know if it's a parody of the 50s or just once again, it's Frank Zappa making fun of everyone and putting everyone down ironically and irreverently all around him and all around the world. The guy was such a genius. That's all he could do is make fun of people because he was above everyone, you guys. I mean, Clark the Shark is kind of like that, but I'm not a musical genius on the level of Frank Zappa. I mean, this guy could play really fast. His songs were really technical. I mean, I admit some of my songs are technical, but I'm nothing like Frank Zappa. This fucking guy, especially later on in the 70s, 80s, this guy just gets incredible. And he becomes a full composer of classical music. It's not really classical, it's Zappa classical. And before this album in 1968, he already had Lumpy Gravy, which you got to hear, you guys. It's fucking amazing. Genius. But then again, it's really just typical Frank Zappa. Everything this fucking guy does is phenomenal. You got to hear his music. And go ahead, and if you know where Jim Aviani is, talk to him and say, Jim, is Clark the Shark right? Was Frank Zappa a fucking genius? The answer is yes. Frank Zappa is so good that most people don't understand him. Most people don't buy his records. They don't even come close to having a grasp of the psychological sense of humor and sense of irony and just sense of irreverence that Frank Zappa had. And people who knew Frank Zappa said he wasn't funny in the studio, or, when you would see Frank Zappa just kicking it on a couch, having a cigarette and a coffee, he was like the least funny guy you could ever talk to. He was serious all the time. I mean, I'm sure he was funny sometimes, but the people who know Frank Zappa are like, the guy was a fucking genius. He was always going into, his vault or his studio, up in Laurel Canyon, and he had to be in there all day long or something because he always was thinking up musical ideas that he had to record. And I'm like that too. Even to this very day at age 58, 59, I'm still dreaming up songs, thinking up songs. And then I kind of realized later that I'm just sort of rehashing a melody that's already been heard. And what's weird about geniuses like David Bowie and Frank Zappa is rarely do they do that. Frank Zappa is always coming up with something brilliantly original that you've never heard before. Like Bowie, and Adrian Belew and Brian Eno and those guys. But there's something even beyond that with Frank Zappa. And this album doesn't really do that. This is kind of a 50s weird album. I will admit and say it is weird, you guys. This album is very funny, very strange. It's almost like rock comedy, which was a concept I remember that Rick Carmody, the red-haired bassist in the Greenhouse Effect GE with me, he was always like, hey, Clark the Shark, we got to make an album that's like rock comedy. And I said, The Who, Tommy, was kind of that. Frank Zappa was kind of already that. Ted, we called him Ted, the guy with red hair, because they called him Red Top, but then that evolved into Ted Rop. So Rick Carmody in the South Bay, even to this very day, of GE, the Greenhouse Effect, the guy with the red hair, the big red mop, he might be bald now, I'm not sure, but back in the day, everyone called him Ted. And a lot of people didn't even know that that was short for Ted Rop. Well, Ted would say to me, we got to do rock comedy with GE. We never really did do that album. I would say the rock opera White Suburban Liars was like my tribute to Frank Zappa as best I could do. It would be the last and final GE Greenhouse Effect album, 1992, and then later, of course, re-released by me in 94 and 95. Those days were long after I was playing music, you guys. But things like Frank Zappa and his albums keep me coming back to music even now and wanting to do music again, even though I'm old. I would love to produce an artist or play my own music if I had the money. I certainly have the time, but if I had the money to do it, I would love to do it, but I doubt I could make something as great as Cruisin' with Ruben and the Jets by Frank Zappa. I love this fucking weird album, you guys. All his albums are weird in the 60s, but this one is like a little anomaly. It's a little island, you guys, even for Frank Zappa. And I keep saying that, like, We're Only in It for the Money is that, Lumpy Gravy is that, Uncle Meat is that, Weasels Rip My Flesh is that, and even Freak Out, the first album, is that. All his albums are anomaly, little islands, done once, never done again, never duplicated, never replicated. That's Frank Zappa, you guys. Genius. And of course, later on, he'd get with drummers and, like Ainsley Dunbar and incredible musicians, Steve Vai or whoever, dude, back in the 80s, late 70s. I wonder what he would have sounded like in the 90s. He died, in the early 90s, you guys. Zappa would have been incredible in the 00s and teens. It's a bummer that he's gone because the world missed out on a lot of great music. And it's weird to say that because he had like what seemed like 200 albums, you guys. He had too much music, overproduction. Just, it was a glut of too much. And that being said, it's almost like there's not enough. You still come away saying he's like Mickey Mantle. What would he have been had he taken care of himself? He would have been fucking even more incredible, you guys. That being said, he's a rock and roll Hall of Famer. He is the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, you guys. Frank Zappa, Cruisin' with Ruben and the Jets, is really just one little album out of hundreds and thousands of songs. From this genius, album songs, compilation albums, posthumous albums now being released by Dweezil and Moon Unit and Ahmet, his family. And of course, they're fighting over the royalties or fighting over the release of the music. And it's just sad what a bunch of douchebags his kids are, you guys. but I kind of understand that too. I'm not sure Frank would have wanted that, but that is the way it is right here on the Clark the Shark Show. But I want to break down this weird album, you guys. I don't care about stars, here. Cheap Thrills. I mean, side one is killer. It is 50 sounding, but it's funny. It's so hokey and retarded, you guys. Love of my life. Now, what's weird about this album, this little rock opera, this little anomaly for Zappa, which really is and isn't, how could I be such a fool from the first album is redone here? And it is awesome, you guys, the way it's redone. Desert. I call it Desert. Desirel. Maybe Dweezil evolved from that. But I don't know, you guys. It's a 50 sounding weirdo album. I just listened to it and I'm like, what the fuck is it? I'm Not Satisfied. That's my favorite song on side one. And Jelly Roll Gumdrop. This is just retarded, you guys. Anything. After you listen to side one, if you're a Frank Zappa newbie, you might be like, I hate this album. I don't understand it. But until you listen to all the albums before it and after it, that's when you judge it, because this is a one-time project. This is a one-time fling, you guys, with, weirdness, which really isn't, because everything, like I said, everything he does is weird. Later That Night. Oh, that's awesome. Once again, he redoes a song from the first album, You Didn't Try to Call Me. I actually like the other version from 1966 and Freak Out more than the You Didn't Try to Call Me here. And Fountain of Love, my little musical project called Fountain from 1992, which was Greenhouse Effect, and I turned it into Fountain, comes from this song, Fountain of Love. And of course, then there's the Fountain CD, named for this, basically, you guys. Frank Zappa, Fountain of Love. No, no, no. Awesome. And Any Way the Wind Blows, once again, he's redoing songs, but he's doing them better or something. Maybe worse, maybe better, but different. That's Zappa. I love Any Way the Wind Blows on Freak Out more than this one, but this one is interesting and really good, you guys. Stuff Up the Cracks. You guys, I'm going to keep it a family show. I always thought of that like Snuff Up the Cracks. Zappa. Yeah, dude, Snuff. Dude, I'm keeping it family. It's not going to get dirty. Get your mind out of the gutter. Stuff Up the Cracks. The song itself is killer, And Collins has some writing credits here. It's not just Zappa, you guys. This group, I'm bummed that this group ended, and these guys are really angry at Zappa, all these guys. Jimmy Carl Black, the Indian of the group, and Ian Underwood, Collins, and Ray Estrada. I think Ray or Roy got busted for child porn, you guys, and he might be in jail right now, or maybe he actually did. I don't even want to think of it, you guys. I don't want to go there. I want to keep it a family show, but I knew that guy was a weirdo when now I wasn't around. I was only 3 years old, you guys, in 1968. But as I would look at Frank Zappa album covers over the years, that bass player was a weirdo. But then again, I was like, all these guys are weirdos. Maybe they were so weird that Zappa just had to pink slip this band and start all over again, you guys. Ray Collins is even a weirdo. Maybe Frank just had to get away from them, or they had to get away from Frank. I'm not sure. But of course, when Frank put together the new Mothers, Mothers 2.0 with Ainsley Dunbar and all those guys, it was probably a better band and all, how that is, but it wasn't this. There was something special about this. Now, that being said, there's something about these guys where it's not tight and it's not all together. It sounds very loose and messy, at least for a perfectionist like Frank Zappa. The first 6 or 7 Frank Zappa albums they're a mess, you guys. I mean, and they're really weird and funny. It's almost like you feel like you're on drugs listening to the Mothers of Invention, and yet you're not on a drug at all. And then you realize Frank Zappa is a fucking drug. You're listening to Zappa and it feels like you're getting drunk, or it feels like you're getting stoned, or you're on acid or something. And yet Frank Zappa did no drugs. I don't know about the other guys in the band, but Frank Zappa, you guys, he didn't do drugs, but it's almost like he couldn't do drugs. The guy was already so weird, so fucking crazy, and such a fucking genius. You guys, it would have been a waste. He could not do drugs. I mean, people probably spiked him with acid or something, or, mushrooms, and he didn't even know it. I don't know, you guys. But he was so weird, and these albums are so strange. And me, Clark the Shark, I'm kind of a musical perfectionist. I like things to sound even and tight. And when I hear these first early Frank Zappa albums, I always come away saying there's something wrong with them, like they're not all together or something. And yet I wouldn't have them any other way, you guys. I want them all fucked up like that because that's how Frank is. And that's Zappa. It's perfect, and yet it can't be perfect. I can't put my finger on this guy. It's just so bizarre. But of course, later on, when he's doing 200 Motels and all that, those other albums, Waka Jawaka, he gets really fucking tight and really exact. When he starts playing with better musicians than the original Mothers, it's just a fact, you guys. It's true. He gets better. And maybe it was all meant to be, or it all had to be, by God up above. I don't know, you guys, but me, Clark the Shark, I want you to buy this album. If you're only 20 years old and you were born in 2004, you don't know much about Frank Zappa. You certainly don't know about Cruisin' with Ruben and the Jets, this album. And I don't want you to buy this album first. I want you to buy those other Frank Zappa albums from the 60s, maybe even the 70s, before you buy this one, because you might not like this one. This album is really, really weird. This album is so weird, it makes We're Only in It for the Money sound like normal or something, you guys. I'm not kidding. This album is really fucked up. They call it 50s. It's really just a parody of everything, 60s and 50s. And it's just fucked up, you guys. You got to hear this album. You got to buy this album. And you tell them, young person, 20-year-old or 19-year-old, today in 2024, you tell them that you heard it on the Clark the Shark show from me right here at 1-800-449-8255. From the fabulous golden EIB Sharkerphone. It's not a microphone, you guys, because it was given to me by Anderson Pooper. I'm not kidding, you guys. I'm going to keep it clean. It's a family show. I'm just going to tell you that Anderson Pooper actually came to my house here in San Diego just yesterday, and he gave me a new golden EIB Sharkerphone. And he said, "You've earned it." And he said, because I, Clark the Shark, am one of the only people alive now in 2024 who still channels Michael Jackson. And he's like, "Clark the Shark, this This sharkerphone is for you. I'm just kidding, you guys. That's not Anderson Pooper. That's Michael Jackson. But seriously, he did come to my house. He gave me a sharkerphone, and he said, "You're number one, Shark. You're going to the Radio Hall of Fame. Someday after you die, maybe it won't be for 500 years, but they will, in the year 2345, they will induct Clark the Shark into the Radio Hall of Fame." And they might even do it because I reviewed Cruisin' with Ruben and the Jets by Frank Zappa and the Mothers. And it really was the only review that you will ever want or ever need of this incredible album, you guys, that I gotta have you buy, and you gotta tell them you heard about it from Clark the Shark. It's weird, it's funny, it's not really commercial, it's like a cartoon. It is so fucked up, dude. You will feel like you're on acid or weed or maybe even mushrooms or like mescaline when you listen to this, and yet you aren't on anything. You're not even on a cup of coffee, dude. You're on nothing, and you will get like fucking stoned or drunk listening to this. By the time you get to the end of this album, and I mean listen to the whole album loud all the way through, just by yourself. Don't have anyone with you. Frank Zappa and the Mothers of Invention, Cruisin' with Ruben and the Jets. 1968, little side note here. There was a band in the 1970s early. I think they were called Ruben and the Jets. And they either liked this album or they liked Zappa or something. And they formed a band kind of paying homage to this album and or Frank Zappa, or something like that. And Zappa actually produced that band and their album. You guys, I'm not kidding. Look it up. Google it. It's true. Right here on the Clark the Shark Show. Get this album, you guys. It's important. Frank Zappa, Cruisin' with Ruben and the Jets. This isn't Frank's solo. This is the Mothers of Invention. Get it, you guys. I want you to buy this. You seriously got to listen to the whole album. And I'm out of here, people. Peace.